Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel and our ongoing series, HMGM, How to Model a Gold Mill in 27,000 Easy Steps. In episode 5, we had our first build episode where we actually covered the process of getting the foundation modeled at a basic level. Well, it's now the new year, and for episode 6 we're going to continue that process and show how that foundation that we started building in episode 5 was shored up, reinforced, braced, made as stiff and rigid as possible, and then how a concrete facing kind of look was applied to it so that it will represent the actual concrete foundation of the Santiago Mill at roughly 1:17 scale. Again, if you're just joining us, maybe because you saw build episode in the icon, we are attempting to model a 1935 flotation mill that is still standing at over 12,000 feet in Colorado's high country. Join us as we continue the process of modeling this amazing structure. Okay, they've still got some more reinforcing to do along the sides of this thing before I can actually start applying the backer piece. Once again, I am filming with a clip-on wide-angle lens, which is going to fuzz things up slightly, but it's either that or just get a little cut-off view, so I guess this is probably preferable. Okay, something else I did earlier is I custom cut all these individual pieces. So I've got a 1 there, 1 here, 2 there, 3 there, 4 there, and then on the inside pieces here I've got a 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. So I should just be able to line all these up with a little bit of glue and get a pretty good fit out of them. So that'll definitely stiffen things up a bit, and then I'll put an aluminum piece across the back here to make it really rigid and kind of secure it so that I can start applying probably... I was thinking of like a floor leveling compound. I mean, that's available in sort of a gray or gray-white with a real fine sand in it. I was reading online about some possibilities for modeling concrete. Another one someone suggested was to take a fine grit sandpaper and glue it on with spray contact adhesive, and then just paint over that. You can get a similar effect. But I think I like the floor leveling compound idea better. So, what I've got is this piece that I cut out really funny like, because it's going to have to tuck in right down there. And then there's going to be a second piece, which is also cut down slightly. It should fit right in there. I had selected MDF rather than plywood or other materials for the general base pieces here. MDF happens to be a manufactured material and is therefore extremely flat and level. However, the edges are fairly soft, and I decided to apply wood hardener. Wood hardener is normally used for repairing damaged wood, but it is fundamentally a type of resin which soaks into the wood and then turns into kind of a plastic material. So I thought it might be useful to help protect the edges and corners from bumps, bangs, and other dings that might occur either while I was working on it or even after the fact. called cold galvanizing compound because it's like 99% zinc when it dries, but it also makes a nice durable gray coating as long as that's the color you're looking for. Well, that's not bad. I don't want to do the whole thing in here because I don't have enough ventilation for it, but another way to change the color of that, because it's going to dry a fairly light gray, is to take another color and just let it dust in. Well, tonight I'm experimenting with the technique of getting the concrete walls to look like they were formed using milled lumber. You may recall in our third episode, pointed out some exterior foundation structures that had this kind of ribbing on them due to the fact that plywood wasn't widely available when this concrete was formed. Now I've already done one here, and I'm going to do the second one using this. Where did I get this tool? Well, I actually started with just a plain shim like this one, measured off the height in scale of one of my levels here that I need to create these groove lines to mimic the effect of pouring concrete against lumber boards instead of plywood like we do now, and it was about 4.5 inches. So what I did is I went 4.5 inches, marked off 4.5, and then comparing one of the walls in the mill, I was able to discern maybe about 12 to 13-ish stripes in the wall. So that means I need to divide 4.5 by 13. 0.34, okay, 1/3 of an inch will work nicely. Well, that came out as 14. I made that a little one too many there. But yeah, okay, so I'll just offset a couple of these a little bit. So there are the first 3. And now, if I come at this at a slight angle and notch that off, and then maybe take a utility knife, clean it up a bit, well, that's the process, and I like how it looks. I mean, I've got a little bit too much relief on these compared to what I see in the actual mill. But here's the beauty. This premixed floor patch, it's almost like a sanded grout. When it is done, you can actually sand it down, the other kind of sanding. So I can just knock this down however much I want using, sandpaper, or maybe even this this drywall sanding block that I've also been using, and take as much or as little relief off as I want. And if I make a mistake and knock it all down, I'll just apply another thin skim coat and do it again. Well, I've had one minor glitch come up. There's a small section of retaining wall on the highest level of the mill in the auxiliary storage room that I just recently figured out because it's inside a room I don't have any photos of. I've never been in there as far as I can recall, and I was only able to make out a small section of it at the last minute from the outside. But I think I can solve that pretty easily. I just need to cut a couple small pieces of this, install them, and then finish over them with the concrete effects, and we'll be back in business. Well, this here's a missing piece of retaining wall that I'm trying to replicate with what I just made. I'm not sure if it actually just goes around like this in the back, or if this piece is actually even higher. This one here I can just barely measure from the outside, but I got no idea what's happening back here. I think it probably just was formed, like this, all the way up to where the ore dump tower starts right here. But that's what I'll have to go with anyway. Just need to get that screwed in from the bottom. I think I'm going to probably shoot a couple up from down on here. And then because I've got this reinforcing piece down here, I'll probably maybe put one up in at an angle, like right up in here or something. And there we go. A couple marks from a misfire on a screw there, but that's okay because that'll all be covered up with the concrete effects. So there's our corner retaining wall. That, I think, is now the last major piece of the foundation that was still missing. Well, that's a wrap for this build episode, everyone. Thanks for joining us once again. You'll notice we spent a lot of time today trying to make our foundation solid, rigid, firm. Structural integrity is absolutely essential, or otherwise if it shifts and moves around at all, anytime it's moved or adjusted, or even while we're working on it in fact, things will start to crack, flake, break off, and it'll just completely ruin all our hard work. Now, what does that remind me of? If you said something in the Bible, you've probably been watching our series before. Let's check out Matthew 7:24-27, which interestingly enough talks about residential construction. This is Jesus speaking. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Well, that's all for today's episode. Take care. Hope to see you again in a couple weeks. Has anyone seen my phone?